Hello and welcome back to the Cricket Draft Show, talking about game week 3 of the Big Bash over in Australia. My name is Dan Jadzevics. I am your host. I'm joined by our analyst, Dan Weston, and our game expert, Chris Dixon. How are you both, chaps? And how was your Christmas, actually? That's probably the most important question to ask first, isn't it?
Pretty chill from my side, yeah. Very nice to see the family. Nice change from last year when I was in a hospital bed as well. So that was quite a cool moment. And really nice to spend some time with people that matter.
Yeah, likewise for me. Still working a bit, unfortunately, so have that on the side. But yeah, no, a nice chilled Christmas itself.
Lovely stuff. Well, if you're new around here, consider subscribing to the Cricket Draft YouTube channel. If you're enjoying this series of content, drop us a like on it as well. If you have any questions, any comments, any thoughts, any ideas, suggestions that you're thinking about players that you might bring in for the following game weeks and things like that, drop them down in the comments and we will get back to you on those. We haven't quite finished game week 3 yet, but we are very close to finishing game week 3. It's fair to say it's gone better for some of us than others, I think would be a fair kind of summary of the situation for game week 3. But Dan, as you're in the category of it's gone better for some of us than others, we'll start with you. How's your game week 3 been? Have you managed to keep track of it over the festive period? Has it slipped to the back of your mind whilst you've been eating mince pies, or have you been on it? You've been analysing and changing your team at the last minute?
Oh, Dan, I've been loving it. I've been focusing on the cricket draft more than the mince pies, which might be a surprise to some people. But yeah, absolutely. Been loving it. Keeping an eye on all of the results and making those changes. I've even set an alarm to make sure that I'd done my changes for the ready for the game week. So yeah, we've still got Heatley sixes to play after this pod's recorded as well. So potential for a few more points. 906 points so far, and that's with the minus 150 taken into account. I didn't go for the 225 in the end. I gambled that Matty Hurst would play, and that ended up being a pretty decent decision. Bringing in Duckett in itself was worth way more than the penalty points, so I was pretty fortunate there. So 2668 over 3 game weeks is pretty much where my model predicted I would be. So model predicts sort of 850 to 900 points per game week on average at the moment. So that's pretty much where I'd expect to be. Maybe actually slightly bit ahead considering we've got another game to go tomorrow. Obviously a couple of blows with injuries, but I think obviously everyone's in the same boat with these injuries right now. I had captain Tom Curran and 36.4% of us have all got Tom Curran, so it's not like it's an unusual instance here. We're all in the same boat, and this is good opportunity to sort of scout some lower value talent.
Yeah, well, it's getting tight between you and Chris, isn't there? Currently there is a 3-point difference between the two of you. 2671 for Chris, 2668 for Dan. That's 112th overall to Dan's 117th. But Chris, obviously, there is another game still to play, but not quite matching those heroics that you managed to put together last week for game week 2. But how's your team shaping up? How are you looking back on game week 3?
Yeah, I mean, it was quite quiet up until today. It was, wasn't doing too good, but wasn't too disappointed in any way. You're not going to have a good week every week, and hopefully you're not going to have a bad week every week either. But then today it kind of took a turn. It was kind of what we call a triple blow today, where Tom Curran was out injured, so in the same boat as Dan there. Tanveer Sangha, who was also injured, and Marcus Stoinis didn't bowl any overs. And I actually chose to play my double captain this week. So having Tom Curran not playing when he's effectively would have been my vice captain, so he's the one where I would have seen the benefit. Not playing the 2 games, Tanveer Sangha not playing, and Stoinis not bowling. So wasn't too happy with that. It's a big lot of points there. Potentially could have missed out on, but again, like Dan said, this gives me a chance to put my tactical hat on and think what I've got to do now with those players going forward. If I don't know why Sangha wasn't playing, I know Curran was injured, but now I've got to put my thinking hat on and think what I'm going to do about those players going forward.
Yeah, okay. So you're fairly happy, not actually going to start wielding the axe yet, but there could be, to be fair, I mean, if Tom Curran's injury is fairly long lasting, there could be quite a big kind of casualty coming out of all 3 squads there, because Tom Curran was in mine as well. Well, the thing is sometimes I'll take some advice on board, and sometimes I'll just go completely against the grain and just ignore the expert. So I decided, in my wisdom, to use my 3 penalty substitutes, because I was in a situation where I think I would have ended up playing with about 8 players. Otherwise, my bench wasn't usable. They weren't getting minutes on the field. So I started at minus 225. So Chris, if you think you've had a bad week, just wait for this one to come through. I then obviously did take your advice on board with the double captain, and had Stoinis and Curran as my double captain, because the Stars had that double game week as well. And I thought, well, this makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? 2 kind of high impact players playing 2 games over the course of your game week. Let's make the most of it. And then, as we found out, that Tom Curran didn't play today. And I think in total that meant my double captain total was 140 points for Stoinis and Curran across, well, what would have been 3 games in the end, wouldn't it, for the 2 of them? I'm in the same boat as you two, Tanvir Sangha, and maybe this is something we need to learn, chaps, going forward, is maybe we need to have like an embargo on some players that we can and can't pick, other than just keep picking the same blokes. So he didn't play today. Minus 225 to start. All of the players that I added combined a total of 129 points for my team so far. So I'm very much in the negative. Brisbane Heat do play tomorrow, and I've got a few Brisbane Heat players in there, but it is going to require them to have a fairly crazy day, I think, against the Sixers to try and kind of claw some of that back. I'm now getting on to being 1,000 points behind the both of you in our little league of 3. So it's starting to feel like my season could be coming to a pretty premature end, which is a bit disappointing, but I'm going to stay focused on it. And I do wonder, and it might be something, Chris, for you to kind of weigh in on here, and maybe something to question later on, but I kind of feel like I've focused a little bit too much on the double game weeks over the course of these 3 weeks, and potentially kind of picked players that I wouldn't necessarily have wanted to pick, but because they looked attractive and had 2 kind of bites of the cherry, I kind of went for those players and potentially got myself in a bit of a hole going into game week 3.
Yeah, I certainly think it's something that in some cases you can look too much into. Certainly, I think it's a case of you want to look at, is that player that you're bringing in going to offer enough value, or are they one of the best players in the game that's maybe worth having in, or are they not? And then you probably want to focus on getting the core of the squad started. So obviously you want to have 11 out week in, week out, and a few options on the bench if things go wrong, such as with these injuries. So I tried to, with myself, I didn't take any penalty chances this week. I decided not to do that, and obviously didn't necessarily work out well with Tanvir Sangha not playing, because there's no one on my bench that's going to come in for him. But I think overall, I try to look at the bigger picture and try and look going forward who's what's going to benefit my team long term, rather than just week by week basis there. But sometimes it's good to take these gambles. If you're struggling a bit lower down, you want to take these gambles, and it's a way that you could potentially jump more if you bring in loads of good double game week players and they come off. It worked for Dan W, didn't work for Dan J. So it's one of those can go either way. But yeah, personally myself, I don't want to look too much into it. I consider it, but I want to work out on a case by case basis. Is the value of bringing them in worth it or not really?
It's a marathon, not a sprint, I think is what we've decided. But I'm learning. And all I know is when the championship rolls around in 2025, I'm going to have all of this kind of ammunition to be able to fire back at you blokes, which I'm looking forward to. So in this kind of table of 3 that we are playing, as I said, Chris, you're currently sat in first place. So far this week, 537 points, 2,671 overall, which puts you in a game ranking of 112th, so just outside that top 100. Dan, as I said, 906 points in game week 3 so far, 2,668 overall, and 117th. So a 5-place difference between the 2 of you, and a 3-point difference as well, just outside that top 100. Myself, 252 points in game week 3, 1,755 overall, and 658th in the game. So it's fair to say I've lost touch with you blokes, which, it'll make the next few weeks interesting. We're in some low-hanging fruit for you guys to take the mick out of me, but is there any coming back for me there, Chris? Dan, do you think, or are you, I guess you blokes are just looking forward now. You're not looking over your shoulder at a bloke in 658.
I think anything can happen. In this game, if there's a player that gets 100 off 40 balls, and there's huge points to be made there. So all it takes is that one player to have that big game. Maybe you want to focus your strategy on risk now. Just keep taking those risks and hope one pays off. You've got nothing to lose. It can't really get any worse for you. So just go, throw your eggs in one basket and say, well, I'm going to take a risk on this player that's not very well known, that he's going to go and blast a quick 100 or take a 5-foot, and it could all turn around for you. But yeah, nothing to lose, and also just go for it.
Yeah, and I was gonna start talking about relegation battles, Dan, but I thought it was a bit harsh. But then Chris said you can't get any worse for you, so I thought maybe I'll throw that one in there as well.
Yeah, I'm starting to look like the fancy Adelaide Strikers here, aren't I?
Melbourne Stars.
And them as well, crikey. That was probably my first mistake, actually, was backing the Melbourne Stars players to do well across the course of a couple of games. But hey, we move on, and we move on towards game week 4, where we actually have a bit of a, I'm not going to call it boring. We have a pretty normal game week 4. There's no double game weeks to look forward to. Everybody just plays one game during the course of the week, and we have that Thunder versus Renegades game as the opening game in that week's of fixtures. Dan, what kind of players are you looking at going into game week 4? I guess now you could start looking at form going into the 4th week of the tournament. Some teams kind of separating themselves out with a good team and a Melbourne Stars. And has that kind of had any impact on what kind of players you're looking at?
Yeah, so I've got some initial thoughts for game week 4. I think that ultimately it's going to boil down to phasing out some Stars players. For me, I've got 3 in my squad at the moment, and they're now 0-5, and they're going to need to be phased out because qualification is obviously a pretty unlikely prospect. Curran's injured, and they're a bit fortunate in the fact that they've got the last game on the game week on Wednesday, the 1st of January. But I think Curran's got a scan tomorrow, so like there's going to be some, whether that's before the game week deadline or not is going to be interesting one. I think I'm probably looking to move him on. He hasn't necessarily performed along with my expectations anyway, so maybe I'll find a different option there. I probably would avoid bringing in a Hurricanes player because they don't play in game week 5, so they would only really be a short-term opportunity there. Maybe I might look at Scorchers players because they're playing strikers who look quite weak. Maybe a value pick such as Ashton Agar, Cooper Connolly, maybe even the Nick Hobson. But yeah, just minor tweaking really. And if I get the luxury of it, which I probably don't now, Tanvesanga's injured, I might even look at a bench upgrade.
There we go. There's some confident talk from Dan Weston going into game week 4. Chris, and I think this kind of might be aimed at me after my pretty kind of damning self-assessment from game week 3. But with the double game weeks, can they? We kind of touched on it in the fact they can be a distraction, but we won't kind of dwell on that again. But what about the minus 75 points? Is there? I've gone too hard on it. I've gone minus 225, and I've never really been able to gain that back. Are they of much use now going forward for players, or are they more kind of like for yourself in 112th? Are you thinking minus 75, or are you thinking, no, I might just stick where I am? And actually, you're looking at a 658, thinking, no, just keep swinging for the trees.
Yeah, I don't think I'll need it at this stage, especially with, there's no teams that aren't playing this week, so at least that gives me a few more options there. And then I've got the 2 free transfers to, tinker with maybe players that are going to be injured or aren't going to play to get that straight there. So, and also actually the game week after, you get 4 free transfers. So there's a bit of a chance to, rejig even more and then start to think tactically beyond this game week. So I think this game week's just, get maybe a few injured players out or a few players that aren't playing out, get the core sorted, and then look a bit more tactical beyond that. So, yeah, I certainly don't think I'll be looking into any negatives this week, however.
And what about Googlies as well? You and I have both used the double captain now, so we've only got the 12th player left. Dan's got both. Any advice for players that have got their Googlies left, or potentially, I suppose there are some players out there that have played the game that haven't got any Googlies left at all?
Yeah, don't use a double captain this week. There's no teams over a double game week. It's saying, it could pay off. You could pick 2 players that do really well, but on paper, it's not a wise decision to make it when there's not a double game week there for anyone. With the 12th man, again, I probably would stay clear unless you've got a really settled side where you're likely that 14 of your 15 players are likely to play. Then you might want to play it, but until you've got that settled squad, I would probably stay clear of that one too, because you want to really maximise the chances. You've got that if you've got a full bench, you've got 4 players that you'll get the highest scoring player out of those players. So I'll probably wait until you've got a strong bench there to use that one.
Dan, have you got any plans to use your Googlies yet? Are they on your spreadsheet, or are they just kind of lurking on a different tab somewhere at the minute?
Yeah, I did consider it this week, the double captain, but I'm quite glad I didn't actually, because so maybe I swerved on that. I thought I'd save it for a bit later, and it'd be interesting to see if I can sort of quantify the extra value of a double captain as well, which will be fascinating as well, because I guess it's almost like having a game in hand, I suppose, in some ways, compared to like a football game or a football league or a cricket league or something like that. You know, you've got something that should yield a reasonable amount of expected value, but yeah, I haven't quite got my head around that yet. I think I've got my head around the penalty transfers and double game week stuff a little bit more. I think I've got a reasonable theory, and actually looking at it from a model perspective, the -75 is such a sweet spot in terms of the exact amount that it should be for that sort of penalty amount of swapping someone out, because very, very few, if any, current players in the game have a modelled expected points of over 75. So really, that is the perfect amount that people should be getting fined for doing those transfers.
Yeah, well, with the benefit of hindsight, maybe the double captain might have been a better use later on in the tournament, when there was a bit more form involved and there were some teams playing maybe weaker oppositions. But yeah, Chris and I, we burnt it in game week 3, so we're not going to get it back. But there we go. Game week 4, as I said, looking a little bit more straightforward for those of you trying to build your squad up with no double game weeks. Maybe not, as Chris said, the best time to use one of the googlies, but as I found out, it's not always as straightforward as just backing the Melbourne Stars, is it? And two of the biggest players in terms of models to do well. If you've enjoyed it, please drop us a like on the video and consider subscribing to the channel. Let us know how your team is looking, any transfers that you're definitely going to be making for game week 4, and we'll see you next week when we get to the end of game week 4, looking ahead to game week 5.